Welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to be talking about content management and content management in our static website that we're building. So what do we mean by content management? Well, we are talking about everything in this area of the page being easily updatable, easily maintainable, not embedded with a load of HTML. So if that's something of interest to you, then stick around because that's what we're going to be going into. And if you like this video, feel free to like and subscribe. Okay, so we're back in our website and we've got our main page and we've got our hard-coded, effectively HTML here. What we're trying to do here is extract this out into a more maintainable way rather than embedding it with all the scripting and styling and everything else that goes on. So it's potentially editable and maintainable by someone who's a little bit less technically minded, someone who's more just driven on the actual content themselves. That's what we're trying to enable here with this. So the first thing we need to do is look at what are our options. So Nuxt out of the box provides a content management system that we can utilize. It's called Nuxt Content, and basically the Nuxt Content lives inside this content folder. So that's probably our best option, is to stick with the Nuxt default one, as that will then compile and generate all that down with our static website. So how do we use the Nuxt Content Management System? So the first thing we need to do is go and actually look at the content itself. So there is an example file already there, but we're going to ignore that. In fact, we're going to get rid of that, and we're going to go and create our own main page. And the MD stands for Markdown. So let's just put some main page content in here for now, just so that we can see when we actually start getting that content up. And if we go back over to our main page, there's a few things that we need to do here to enable that content to be embedded within our main page. So the first thing we need to do is we need to actually go and get that data. So how do we do that? We can use a Nuxt method called fetch. Let's just have a look and see what this does. So now that we've saved that, this is actually going off, and $content is basically telling it to go over to the content folder and look for a file called main page, which is what we just created, and go and fetch that data. Go and get everything that's inside that file. Okay, and we put this in a variable for this page called page content. This can be any name, there's nothing specific here, but we're going to call it page content because that's pretty much a good description of what it is. So to actually use page content, we need to change, we can change our H1 up here into a tag that looks like this. So a Nuxt content tag that actually knows how to use and how to render the markdown is what this Nuxt content does for us. It takes the markdown that's in the file and renders it back as HTML. And we're telling it that we want to use the page content variable. The other thing that we actually need to do is expose that page content variable. So we do that with the data method, so that we tell it that page content is exposed up to the HTML up here. Without this method, this would give you an error. So with that in place and that in place, when we save it, we can see that our heading has now gone and it's been replaced with the actual content from our markdown file. So that's a good start. So now that we've got that, we can go and expand and look at this a little bit more in terms of the markdown. So markdown has some formatting that you can look up. It's an industry standard in terms of its formatting. So if you want to have a title, we can go and put our title back in with a notation that looks like that, and then we see that that's what that comes back as. You can also embed actual HTML in there. So again, we can space that out if we want to with just a break. So as you can see, we've now separated this so that we can just type in any arbitrary text in here, and that instantly comes up on our page, which is exactly what we want. So we can leave that for now. So what about if we thought about our title of our page? Can we extract that out of being hard-coded in here? What if we wanted to give the user that's maintaining this page control over what the actual title is that's on the page? So Markdown has another technology that kind of sits alongside it called front matter, and you can Google for that if you need to. And front matter is basically a way of embedding some extra information into the Markdown file. So, and front matter is basically denoted by the 3 dashes. So as soon as we put that in our file, this is the front matter up here, and that separates it from the rest of the Markdown. So even if I put, and let's just change that to main page and save that, nothing will change here because we're not actually using this title here. So let's go back over here, and what we should be able to do is replace this with this dot page content dot title, and if we save that, we now get main page up there on the title bar. It's changed to uppercase main page. So that's now reading this from here. So we could call this whatever we wanted to in here now, and when we save that again, it changes up here on the title bar. So now that we've got some information in our Markdown, we can actually use this to our advantage for some search engine optimization. So some of the HTML attributes that search engines like Google and Bing use to index pages, they actually use a couple of extra HTML attributes. So we can take advantage of this inside our Markdown, and we can embed just another couple of arbitrary front matter tags. So a description that Google can read, and it puts up on the search page for that particular page, and some keywords to help it identify what the actual content of that page is all about. So again, when we save this, nothing's using description or keywords, so we're not going to see anything visibly on the page there yet. But if we go back over to main page again, the way that you can do this with Nuxt is inside the head. So these elements live inside the head element of the page. So let's just paste in some code. So we're adding to the object that goes into the head element and gets returned, and we're calling this meta, and that's defined as an empty array. And then we look at the page content, and if there's a description tag in there, then it adds into the meta with a description and takes the actual content of the description. And the same goes for keywords as well. We check for keywords being in the actual page content, and if it's there, it will add it to the keywords meta tag in the header. So if we saved this, again, we would see no difference on the actual page, but if we bring up the HTML and go and look in the head element, we should see the description tag and right underneath it the keywords tag, and those are coming from our Markdown file. So again, it gives the content producer, whoever's writing that Markdown file, the ability to affect the search engine optimization for this particular page as well by populating that data. So they don't need to know anything about HTML or meta tags or anything like that. They can just change that front matter and they're good to go. So this is all well and good. We've got our main page now reading from the content, but as you can see, we've had to make a fair few changes there to that page. So if we wanted to reflect the same changes into something like the Contact Us page or any other page on our website, we've effectively got to make exactly those same changes into each of those pages. So we're going to have a data element, we're going to have a fetch element, we're going to have a head element, and it's all doing exactly the same for each page, other than the actual Markdown file that's being read here. This is the only thing that is going to change around that information. So we need to look at a way of extracting all of this out of here and away from each page on the site. So as you remember, we've got our layout file that all of our pages use. So we need to look at a way how we can use that layout file, our new default, and extract out all of that information that we're doing in the main page there into the scripting basically inside our template. So let's have a look at how we might manage some of that. So the first thing we're going to do is remove this fetch, or copy it at least. So let's copy that over and into here. And we now can't use main page in this instance. So there is a Nuxt method or an object that we can use in its place, and that is the root mechanism. So we get hold of the current route that's being navigated on, so that would be this main page bit here, and we're using that name to actually go and look up. So there is a direct correlation between what's in the URL up here and the name of the content markdown file that's used. So that's the first thing to bear in mind, is make sure that you name your content files appropriately with this particular mechanism that we're using here. So with that in mind, we've then got our page content inside our layout file. So can we also then just extract this whole head method here? So let's get rid of that and see if we can move that into here and what that looks like. So with the fetch, we set up this .page content. We set the title in the head to this page content, and all of that should be okay. We also need to copy over this data method so that this page content is exposed between the fetch and the head method. So we'll paste in that exposes the page content object, and when we save that, with all of that in place, we can refresh our page, and we've got our content and we've got our page title still being set correctly. So that's all being done inside the layout now, as opposed to the main page. But we can't really get rid of anything else in the page itself. For instance, if I go and take the fetch method away and save that, when that refreshes, we actually lose our content. So even though we're calling it the same variable name inside the layout, we're not actually sharing the information that we're getting. So you finish up where you have to fetch it both in the layout to do the head part of the page, and then again inside each page itself. So how can we overcome this shortcoming as well? So what we can do is we can utilize Vuex, which we used in our previous video. So you can check that out if you didn't see what we've done with Vuex up to this point. But if you remember, we created our static site properties, and Vuex, if you remember, is a way of sharing information across the site as a whole. So we can use the Vuex store to share the page content from the layout that's being used to the actual page that's being used. And the way that we can do that is we need to go and add some code into the Vuex store itself. So we can go and add page content object, and we can also go and add what's known as a mutation. So by default, you shouldn't edit the Vuex store. You shouldn't edit any of these properties directly. You should go through an abstracted method that actually does that update. So we have a method called set page content, and the set page content itself receives the page content, and then it sets the state page content in here. So this way you've got total control, because everyone who updates this page content should call this method. They shouldn't be going directly to this object here. And likewise for views and components that actually want to go and get the information as well. Although in our previous video we directly accessed site and site name and telephone and that kind of stuff, ideally you should have a getters as well to get at that information. So we'll do that here, and that's a kind of best practice that you should implement a getter to get at the content. And the reason for that being that it may not be that you just want to return an individual element from here. It might be that you want to return something and have some logic inside this getter. So you might be checking multiple state properties within the Vuex store and then returning a different type of object or something along those lines, rather than the actual content itself. But in our case, it's a simple request. We're asking for the page content and we give it back the page content. So that's the code that we need in our Vuex store. And incidentally, you'll notice there that when I saved, that didn't update. So just as a quick aside, I'm going to go and make some quick changes to our settings. So by default, we're using Vita, if you remember. I'm changing it here so that we're using Prettier as the default formatter now inside, and only for view files are we going to use Vita. With that done, when I save this, you'll see that whole settings file now updates. And likewise, if I go back over here and force a save on here, you'll see that will now also format up nicely for us. So that gives us our formatting fixed. So anyway, back to the problem. So we've now got our Vuex store. So we can leave that where it is. So we need to make some changes in here. So rather than this being some data that's exposed directly in this particular page, we're now going to pull that page content from the Vuex store. We can get rid of page content here, and we can reference the actual store and then getters and then get page content. So this is actually going to go and call our getter, which will return our page content. And that's the only update that we need inside a view page. So we can save that, and it's probably going to break for now. But we now need to populate that with the actual content that we're reading here. So how do we do that? After we've actually got the page content, and we don't need to store it on the actual layout anymore, so we can just do, and we're now getting the page content, and we're setting that, we're calling that mutation set page content, and we're passing it the page content that we get back from the content management system using that root name. So that gives us that. Now we need to change the actual head element as well. So let's go and change what we need to in the head element. We can change the title. So rather than this page content title, we need to change that to use the Vuex store. So we change it to this store, getters, get page content, and then the title property. Okay, so it's very similar to the code that we had inside the page to just go and get the page content item. And we're also going to change both of these as well. So description follows exactly the same. Rather than this page content, we get the store, getters, get page content, description, and we also have to change this property here. And we do the same with the keywords. So just a quick check, we're updating our page content. So if we save that, let that refresh, and we've got our page content coming back out again, and we've got our page title up the top there. So that's good, and that's all coming and being shared from the layout. And we've got our main page now that just has the Nuxt content element and actually details the layout that's being used. Everything else, the content, everything is all being driven by the layout. So that's good. So let's reflect that across a couple of the other pages. So let's go to the Contact Us page. So we can replace that in there. We can get rid of that head method now. And we can save that. And let's see what we get. So we also need to go and create a Contact Us Markdown file, and we can for now just change this with some relevant details. And we can change that. So we save that and let that refresh as well. Okay, so we have a problem. When we move from our page to our other pages in our website, we've got a problem where things aren't updating. So why would that be? The reason for that is, so it's obviously working when we refresh our page back from the server. So we get our Contact Us and everything is all working. And if we go to the home page and we refresh that, we get our content as well. But it's not working when we just navigate inside the browser. So navigating between these pages is changing the URL, but it's not actually going back to the web server for that page. That's the whole point of a vue.js application and a statically generated site. So what we need to do is actually watch for when someone navigates between pages. So there is a watch method inside Nuxt.js, and we can put that in our layout, and we can watch for changes for when the route changes. So if you remember, we used the root object to actually get the page name. Now the problem that we've got is that when this changes, we want to actually go and fetch the content for the new route that's being requested. So what we're going to do is extract this code out to a method called run navigation actions. So we need to add a method into the layout. So we can do that by adding the methods in, and we can create a method like so, and inside that method we can move what was going on inside the fetch into there, and we can also call that same method when the fetch method is called. That's giving us an error because there's now no asynchronous activity inside the fetch method itself. So when we save that, will reformat, and we've now got our fetch calling run navigation actions, and we've got our watch on the route calling run navigation actions. So whenever we basically refresh the page or we move between pages inside the browser, it's going to call and request the page content to be updated from the current route and store that into the Vue.js page. So with that said, I should be able to go back to the home page and refresh that. And then when I navigate to the contact page, you can see the contact us title is there, and we're on the contact page. And obviously if I refresh that back from the server, that still works as well as it did before, and now I can navigate back to the home page without refreshing back from the server, and that's all working correctly as we would expect. What happens when we go to our team page? So our team page at the moment has all the same hard-coded bits and pieces that the contact us and the home page had. So let's just go and change the team page so that it matches all of our other pages. So we get rid of the head out of there, and we can leave that as being that for now. And when this refreshes, we go to contact us and we go to the team. You'll notice that the title is now staying at contact us or at home. It's not changing when we move to the team, even though we're not overriding it in the actual page itself. So what is going on? Let's go and have a look and see if we can figure out what's going on here. So okay, so we are getting a 404 when we go onto the team page, and the reason for that is relatively obvious if you think about it. We're navigating to my team, and inside our layout we are trying to find the markdown for my team, and there isn't one, so hence the 404 not found. We would expect that. That's entirely a valid situation, that you might not have. Someone may have created a page that doesn't have a corresponding markdown file. So how can we combat against this so that we don't get this misleading title up here? If someone does that, we can go back to our layout file, and we can just change this run navigation actions a little bit and put a try catch around it. So we can come in here and we can go for a try catch. We can put the actual code that we want inside the try. In fact, that's not quite right. We want to always store it regardless. We want this line inside the try, and we need to declare page content outside of the try. So let's okay, so we're obviously throwing into here now, so we're not defining page content. So when it comes to get page content down here, that's not going to work. So let's create a page title inside here, and we're going to set the title to the root name, and we're going to replace any dashes with spaces. So what we would hopefully see is that my team becomes the title, exactly like that. So my team is now coming from basically the URL that we're using, but we're prettifying that and removing any slashes out of that, and that's kind of the best we can do without any content that's actually telling us anything. So we're kind of guessing at the title of the page from the root itself, which may or may not work in your particular case, but it works okay here. So we can now navigate between pages that do and don't have Markdown, and we get our nice content being updated and the titles update on the page as well. The only other thing to point out is that now that we're not trying to share data inside this object between the fetch and other parts, so we're using Vuex to do that. That means that we can potentially actually get rid of the data tag in here, because we're not referencing anything up here, and if we were, we would be using the Vuex store now to get the page content. So we can quite happily remove that data method, and everything is still working as we would expect. This has nicely, in my view, tidied up our pages so that we have just some nice layout and some brief HTML in there that we can populate a whole page with now. And all we've got in the scripting is pointing it at the layout that we want it to use. So we've tidied up our pages, done a little bit of SEO as well inside the Markdown file, and we've got our website nicely working across pages with content management. So that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed that, and if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.